Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Oxnard Live. I'm your host, Daniel Chavez Jr. Tonight's episode is on the history of cannabis, Prop 64, and social equity. But before we get started, I just wanted to share this brief little disclaimer. As an Oxnard Planning Commissioner, this episode is solely for informational purposes only. It will not affect my decision making when dealing with projects that come before the city as a planning commissioner. And if it does, I will do the responsible thing and recuse myself from voting on the item. With that being said, our guest tonight is an advocate for cannabis as well as a person who has over 25 years in media relations as a director, executive producer, who has worked in big name brands such as ESPN and so many more. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Rodney Medina to the show.
Hello there, Daniel.
Hi, Rodney. How are you?
Thank you. Man, I always hate hearing 25 years. I think it's closer to 30, but hey, I'll take it.
Oh, I said over. So we.
Yeah, yeah. It's just got all those years, man. It goes by fast, as you know.
I bet, and looking at your bio, that's pretty, some name dropping going on right there. You got ESPN, you got CBS, you got TV Land, Comedy Central, Animal Planet, EA Sports, and I'm pretty sure there's a huge array of more items that you've participated in over the years, and that is extremely impressive.
Well, in television, you do a lot of work and you freelance, so you do pop around to a lot of different companies. But I think what I'm most proud of really is my start here in Oxnard, because it was here in Oxnard where I started in media. I knew I wanted to get into filmmaking, and so I utilized the local resources, Oxnard and Ventura College. Ventura College they were pretty limited on their communications curriculum, and at the time, Oxnard College was really trying to up the game against Ventura. And so they started a communications department. And then they had the internship program with local TV stations. And at the time, we had two local news organizations, which was KTIE, and which eventually became Katy Television. And there was Jones Intercable. So we had two entities of news here at that time on television every day, daily news. And I thought it was incredible that this little town that we had our own two news organizations battling against each other, right? And both going trying to go up against KEYT. But that's where I cut my teeth in this media. It was a long time ago, but I was a camera operator, a writer. I'd go out and shoot. I produced the local sports TV show with Randy Rosenblum. We had the daily news program with Letitia Ponce and Steve Miller. I was even the weatherman at one point, and I'll tell you how that happened. I used to put in the graphics every day for the weather. Windy or cold or fog in the morning. The weatherman, the actual meteorologist, would call in every day, and he would give me the notes, and I would put them up. Well, there were some days I wouldn't hear from him, so it was just me. And I grew up here, man. I think I know this area pretty good. I know what's been happening. I know what's gonna. So I was the way I put in, partly cloudy, and it was gonna be this, or it's gonna rain. Hey, nobody knew the difference. But
Was it one of those that you looked out the window and determined what the weather was going to be?
pretty much that's how it was, and that was, So I apologize to anybody who made any plans according to my weather predictions at that time. But I was the weatherman at least 2 to 3 days a week.
That I guess that's good to know. And it's also very interesting to find out that Oxnard had its own like two news outlets, and
Yeah.
fortunately, it's not the same anymore. I remember Jones cable. Growing up, that was kind of like the go-to thing. So I do remember that, as you said, that because then it ended up going to Adelphia and then Charter and who
Right.
knows what it is now. I think Spectrum now.
Yeah,
Uh,
Jones was the very first cable company that came into Oxnard. In fact, I remember being at a friend's house in Oxnard, and the neighbors were just moving in, and he was telling us what he was doing. He goes, "Oh, I'm going to be the general manager for a new cable company, and he was describing this whole concept of cables and all our channels are going to come through this, and we were just scratching our head. We had no idea, we just coming out of broadcast. So that's when Jones Intercable came in and basically brought their franchise to the city, and it's never been the same. And it's kind of sad to me that we do not still have those two news outlets, or at least one news outlet, because it did give you it gave more access to information to people. Right now, if you don't have a computer, and if you're not in the internet, or you don't have a strong web connection, you're pretty much relying on whatever, the newspaper or the radio. So there's a lot of information that, Facebook is just one little outlet. And I say it's little because it is little when you comparatively speaking. So I really hope that someday soon that we can bring back a broadcast network here in the local area. And I think it just helps disseminate information out, but it also helps people. It also helps the community keep our leaders accountable, because now they're going to be interviewed, they're going to be seen more, they're going to be asked more questions by journalists. And so I think hopefully someday soon we can get back to that, or at least have it online. But again, we're going back to that online thing. We have some dead channels. I think we need to fix them or get them back started and start some sort of local news program. So
Oh,
maybe that's where you're headed.
I don't know about that. I'm not a professional journalist, and I don't try to, pretend that I am. I respect all of those individuals that got degrees in journalism or photography or video production. They are the true heroes when it comes to things like this. And I agree with you. We do need to maybe fill in some of those dead channels that we have that nobody really knows what they're for, but they're still there. Um, So let's talk about cannabis.
Okay.
You are a public advocate for cannabis, and it wasn't until about 2017 when you started being more vocal in regards to cannabis. Um, Tell us, how did you get into it, and then give us a little history of cannabis.
Okay. Well, I personally got into cannabis, other than knowing about it, obviously from my youth all the way up until now. It's there. I used cannabis throughout my life in various stages. But now looking back, that was more adult use and it wasn't medicinal. Not that perhaps it was, but I didn't know that at the time. But it was of course, with my television experience, there was a local company that came into Ventura called Greenflower, and they were an online cannabis educational company. So I went to start to work for Greenflower, and it was through my employment there that I really started to learn a lot about cannabis, the history, the medicinal properties of it, the health benefits, because we had experts who would come into our facility and we'd do these TED Talks, and they would talk their expertise on the plant. So I was hearing from advocates and activists and researchers and expert or doctors and just different people from all areas of cannabis. So, and because I was working on the project, shooting and editing, of course, just through osmosis, I started retaining all of this information. So I grew an affinity for the plant, and I say that, and I talk about it and her as if it's a person, because it is a spiritual connection that you kind of start to develop after this time, this amount of time, because it's an appreciation for knowing what it's going to do. And then I went to started traveling. Started I went to Mexico to I was invited down there to a cannabis convention, and there I met some people from Colombia, and of course I was invited to Colombia to go down there, and it was just to go participate. And that's really where I started to find that this plant has an appreciation around the world, a love around the world, a future around the world. And it kind of grew on me. I just started to really see how important this was to so many people. And I literally was on the top of a pyramid, the sun pyramid in Teotihuacan. And I was talking to one of the activists up there, and we we realized that we're not doing this for ourselves, like cannabis legalization and all our research and fight and activism. It's for the future, right? It's for the future. It's for up future generations. We don't want this to be. We don't want this plant to be held back from them the way it was held back from us. Um, Prohibition has lasted so long in this country, since the early 1900s, and that we've lost time. We've lost research time. We've lost appreciation time, and that really has stunted our ability to use it medicinally and to have it be a part of our life that could probably be benefiting us a lot more than it does today.
Um, so how did you get in contact with this company in the first place? Because I know you said they were new, they just
Yeah,
came.
yeah,
So,
it was funny. Craigslist. I was on Craigslist. I had just moved back into the area. I lived out in the Inland Empire for some years, and I had just moved back in the area. And I was looking through Craigslist, and I saw this ad for this company, and I saw some of their content. It was really well produced, and they were talking about cannabis. And I go, "Wow, that's pretty cool." I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm going to apply for this job, but I would like to do some work for them. So I was hired on as a freelancer to do some editing, and so it was just through Craigslist. In fact, multiple people there. And here's a story of irony. When I started working there, there was this writer, a real quiet guy, about my age, and it turns out that when we started talking, he was the promotions editor at KTIE when we worked together 30 years ago at that TV station here in Oxnard. He was doing promos and I was doing news.
oh wow,
Yeah, and then he went on to do his Hollywood career and I went on to do my career, and then here we are now back working together. There was only 6 of us in the office, and it turns out we had both started helped start this KTIE together. So it was through Craigslist that I found it, and the rest is history.
that is definitely pretty exciting to be able to work with somebody that you worked with so many years ago, and now you're because you guys jive well back then. Now you guys get to do it again,
Yeah.
and it's also worth noting that um, at many events throughout Oxnard, and I believe probably even Ventura County, you are seen running around with your camera taking photos, and these are really great photos that you're taking. So I just wanted to throw that out there that you are a photographer also that takes a lot of great
Mhm.
photos. Um, Moving into the next part, thank you for that little history about you getting into it and then the usage for the cannabis. Um, I want to talk about medicinal versus recreational. We know that medicinal is more of a medical usage for those that have like glaucoma or some other medical needs, and cannabis fills in that versus doing traditional medications. And then you have recreational that anybody over the age of 21 is allowed to use it. Um, Explain the differences between the two, because people that use it recreationally on a daily basis, they think, oh, well, it's medicinal. But I don't believe that's the same concept of the two.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
there's
if to understand the difference between the two is sort of to understand the history of cannabis and hemp, and I'll throw hemp in. The cannabis plant is divided into two categories: the male and the female plant. The female plant is the flowery one, the one that produces the sweet smelling buds that people use as in their pipes and other smoking apparatuses. And hemp is the male plant, and that is the one that has been used traditionally for both both plants. I mean, both have been used for centuries, but hemp was used for textiles. And between the two, there's over 60,000 uses for this plant. I mean, the plant has the ability to heal some of the most deadliest diseases known to mankind, and the plant can replace chemical ridden medicines that are prescribed for that we use today for depression and insomnia, and those things are poisonous. And the plant hemp, for example, can aid in the reduction of which is unfortunately hurting us today, is deforestation around the world. And if we grew more hemp, we wouldn't have to destroy the habitat of so many of the endangered animals. Um, this this plant was made illegal for a reason that for reasons that just don't really make sense. The the um, the history goes back really thousands of years to China or to Asia when the plants was known to be used. I mean, over 30,000 years ago, archaeologists found it in the tombs of some of the people who were buried back then. So they know that they were using it. It's been used for oil's been used for cooking. They've been converting it to fuel. They use it as a food source, as fiber, and of course, medicine. The seeds themselves are one of the most nutritional seeds on the planet, and they provide just about every vitamin and mineral that our bodies need. The hemp plant can be used for clothing. It only requires to grow it. It only requires half the water to turn it into a I mean, to use it as a like a fiber. It only requires half the water to turn it into that fiber than we would with cotton, and it requires no chemicals or fertilizers to do that process. It can be hemp plant can be used for housing as an insulator, fiber boards, hempcrete. They use this machine called the decorticator, which basically shreds the plant up into these fibers, and they can use it into make it into those various forms that can be used commercially for textiles. The hemp plant is a bioaccumulator, which means it can actually clean the soil and remove metals and toxins and radiation and contamination from water and soil. They use the hemp plants in the Chernobyl in Russia to clean the soil after that nuclear disaster. They used hemp in Fukushima to clean the earth to try to pull all those toxins out. Now, what do you do with that afterwards? Well, scientists have said, well, we can convert it into a fuel source because now you have all this fibrous stuff that's poisoned, but they could convert it into a fuel source. But that kind of goes against the whole cleanliness because that process is really dirty and it can damage it itself. So, and I explain all of this because I want the people to understand that there is a difference between hemp, because there are some hemp derived products that people are using medicinally, and then there's cannabis derived products. And one of them, hemp, let's go back to cannabis. Cannabis, the one that sold in the dispensaries. It has a cannabinoid in it called THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, and that is the cannabinoid that gives you the psychoactivity, right? Makes you high. That goes right to we have our body has this incredible receptor system, CB1 receptors, which focus on the head, and CB2 receptors, which focus on the body. Now, when you take opioids and all of that kind of, those things go into the head and they have the effect that they do. But unfortunately, those things can kill you. They can, if you take too much, what happens? Your heart stops, you stop breathing, people die of that. Nobody has ever overdosed on THC. You can get really high and get loopy and be, panicked, but you'll never die from an overdose of THC because that CB1 receptor will not do that to the body. So you can inject as much or you can take as much THC as you want. You can get really high, but you will never, ever die from it. Now you could get so high and you run in front of a bus, but that's a completely different. Don't mean to bring a bus up into it, but
Thank you for bringing that up into the conversation.
yeah. So then there's that, and then you have the hemp, which is more they derive CBD, which is cannabidiol, and everybody hears about CBD now today. And they can use that. That goes more to the CB2 receptors. Remember, I said CB1 and CB2 receptors, and the CB2 receptors are more responsible for inflammation in the body. So if people have aches and pains, um, uh, let's just focus on aches and pains. So if you rolled an ankle, for example, and you have some inflammation and it's a little sore, if you can use some topical you can use some topical cannabis CBD extract. This one happens to have a little THC in it, and put it on there, and it will help bring down the inflammation of that area if the pain is due to inflammation. If because what our body does, this is what's incredible about the plant. Our body has the word is in endogenous. We have the endocannabinoid system within our body. We produce cannabinoids, and so whenever we fall a little bit out of health one way or the other for any particular reason, our body creates cannabinoids and will go kind of like a little fire department and go and put out that problem or help do it, help solve those issues. Well, our body can only do so much. So then we begin to have that cannabinoid and an endocannabinoid deficiency. Endo meaning internal, endocannabinoid deficiency. So we're not producing enough to keep our body in peak health. Well, the cannabis plant happens to have and make and create cannabinoids that lock and work exactly into those receptors the same way our own endocannabinoids work. It's like a lock and key. So they call those phytocannabinoids from the plant. Outdoors phyto, indoor and inside endocannabinoid. So cannabis has those cannabinoids in it. So when you bring it into your body, whether it's through CBD, a tincture, or you smoke it, THC, it actually works in the body. The body needs it. It uses it and can supplement what your body's not making on its own. I always like to say that if you're, I forgot what I was going to say about that, but anyway, so and there's a lot of different methods of intaking the cannabis to get it to the area where you need it to get in order for it to help. So now remember, CBD does not have any psychoactive effects. Hemp plant, all those products you see on TV and you hear about on the radio, one of the first things they say is you will not get high, and it's true, you will not get high. It does have THC in it, but it's at such a small, it's like 0.03% of that can go into those products in order for them to be allowed to exist. Anything above that, then it begins to be a THC product, and then you're regulated by the state. You can't ship it across state lines and things like that. There's very stringent track and trace protocols for products with THC. So the things that it can do, depending on what your need is, you would favor one over the other. If you need things for insomnia, or you need to relax, or you need good sleep, you may want a product with some THC in it and some CBD. You can actually go to the dispensary and find products that have different ratios of THC to CBD ratios. They could be 30 to 1, 30 parts CBD to 1 part THC, all the way to 1 to 1, which means they're equal in the amounts of THC and CBD. And depending on what your need is, you have to just try what there is to see what it is works for you. And too many people will try cannabis to alleviate some sort of pain or back pain. Like, oh, I didn't work. Well, how long did you use it? I tried it for a whole week. You can't do that. When they give you pills, when your doctor prescribes you medicines, it doesn't work unless it's a painkiller, that'll work. But if you're trying to alleviate something, you need to use it over the course of time to see how your body is going to take it. So you have to try different products, try different brands, try different ratios, try different intake. Uh, uh, Intake it differently. You might smoke it. You might vape it. Vape it is heating it and basically ingesting a steam like the pens, but then they have some more elaborate ways of vaping. Or it could be a topical. They have patches that you can cut, and they're highly concentrated THC that you can put on pain spots, and then they can go into those areas. So it really is. Think about all the uses that it has now, and how much more it could have, how much more we could have been, how much more ahead we could have been in this medicinal game had we had the 90 years back from prohibition.
I want to talk about, because you brought up something very important to know about hemp. And of course, everything that you just said is very important and great information. But
Mhm.
one thing you talked about hemp was how it's able to go and clean out the soils and waters. Um, I was fortunate enough to be part of the Oxnard Chamber Leadership Academy, and one of our sessions was on agriculture. and they touched on that, on how there's a benefit for hemp to be able to clean out the soil and make it rich, make it uh, growable.
Nutrient
Lost
rich.
it. Nutrient. Thank you. Um, to be able to grow again. And one of the big things here in Ventura County is that we have so many farmlands that keeping our soil and farmland still viable, it's important to clean it out. So I just want to say thank you for mentioning that, because it is very important to note that. And then all the other things that hemp is also responsible for. You mentioned oils, you mentioned fuel, you mentioned clothing. um, but I want to ask about, because there's been a lot of people, and when you're coming down the 101 grade through Camarillo, you can get this big whiff, and that's from the hemp fields that are already out there. Um, a lot of people believe that you can get high off of this, and that they're going to just ransack those fields. I know you mentioned that it's like a small percentage, 0.03% of actual THC. So if somebody in their wisdom, I'll just say that, because these people won't have that, um, how much of hemp would you actually have to take for it to actually even come close to what actual marijuana is?
You wouldn't. I mean, because there is no amount that you could take that would give you those effects that cannabis that has THC in it does. It just won't happen. They might think they're getting some sort of high off it. You're not going to get high. You might feel relaxed, but you're not going to get high like what somebody who would be going to steal that would want. They want to get high. So there, it's, and I'm glad you bring up our area because things have been going on back and forth with the county and growing hemp. People complaining about the smell. I don't hear them complaining about onions because I could hear the smell onions coming down the grade too. And some people do not like onions, but they let onions grow all the time. I love the smell of our county. I even love the smell of manure because I know something's coming, right? It's our season. I grew up here, grew up in El Rio. The strawberries were right. The strawberry fields were right down the block. In fact, when it rained a lot, the strawberries would float down the gutters, and we'd pick them up. We were little kids, and we'd eat them. Like, hey, we don't even have to go over there; they're coming down the street. So agriculture is a very exciting thing, and I wish more people knew what hemp could provide, what it does naturally, what good it provides, because I think they would be more open to having it part of our life here in Ventura County. Because it is a bioaccumulator. Like you said, it cleans the soil, and I would rather have, and they're already being used. There's some farmers out here who are putting it in their crop, kind of in a rotation. So they'll clear out a certain area of strawberries. They'll plant hemp there for that specific reason, to put nutrients back. It's the best way to naturally put nutrients, and it grows fast. So they put the nutrients back into the system. That's much better than the synthetic or chemical based nutrients that they put back in the soil. It's not good for humans at all. I would rather have hemp be part of that process than for Monsanto to be part of that process, because we don't want that stuff in our groundwater and in the dirt. We all know that organic food is supposed to be better, tomatoes and vegetables like that. I don't even, if you took a tomato that was grown on our Oxnard plain and you took a tomato that you grew in your own backyard, I guarantee you that tomato in the backyard is going to have more nutrients in it than that one grown in the Oxnard plain, because our soil in our backyard isn't tapped out, and we can amend the soil and make it nutrient rich. And you can't do that on the entire Oxnard plain naturally. You can do it with chemicals and man-made things, but not naturally. So hemp, to me, has a huge future in our world. um, it also is a zero carbon plant, in that it cleans the air. Even whenever you use it in materials like hempcrete, it can actually, now hempcrete, what they do is they mix hemp hemp fibers with water and lime, and they mix it into this kind of a sludgy mess, and then you can pack it into walls. They have a system, a way of doing it, and so now you have this insulator that is fire resistant, it's mold proof, it's it helps block sound, and it helps keep heat in, or cold air in, and so it can help the temperature. It's a great it's a great use of this material. um, and I think the more and more people understand and appreciate the many uses, remember I said 60,000 uses, they will be more open to growing it here. Even if we have, see, if you're going to grow it in a greenhouse, you can't grow enough to make a difference, because it's now taking too much money to grow it in that greenhouse. You have the lighting, you have the water, irrigation. It's a weed. It needs to grow natural. It needs to grow wild. Now, maybe they can develop a hemp plant that doesn't smell so much or something, but or if it smelled like Skittles or bananas, maybe they'd be open to it. But until then, I think it's just going to be this kind of this dialogue that we have, like we're having now, so people can become more educated about it, appreciate the plant a little more, like they appreciate an onion, so that they can take that, so they'd be willing to sacrifice a little bit and say, you know what, hey, I smell hemp, but it's not weed. Hopefully, we can make it part of our culture here in Ventura County and the world.
I like how you mentioned that you love the smells of Ventura County because definitely, I work in LA County, so my coworkers are always ask me, "Are the strawberries ready?" And I go, "No, I did not smell it when on my way home, so no, they're not ready yet."
Yeah,
Because that's always one of those great things when you're going down Rice Avenue. You start, especially early mornings or late nights, when it's cold, you smell it, and it's really, really strong. And this is the community that we love, being able to smell these different things. And yeah, the onions thing, you go down Woolley Road, man, you're going to smell those onions. And um, so, yeah. I want to touch on shifting gears. I may mention the difference between medical use of cannabis and recreational use. Um,
can I stop you right there for a second? You
yeah,
said recreational use, and being in the industry, we're really trying to change that vernacular. A lot of people do say recreational, but I always say it's not kickball. We're not out there playing softball. It's adult use. They don't say recreational alcohol. You're an adult and you're drinking alcohol, and those are all the things that we're trying to do to help kill the stigma against this plant, because it has a lot of bad, it has a bad rap, and it has been
yeah.
given a bad rap. And so with the language, I'm not scolding you or anything, I'm just, those are the kind of things that we want to refer to cannabis. It's an adult use, but honestly, it's medicinal use too. If somebody comes home and he wants to relax, or she wants to relax for a half an hour before they have to go into the evening with the family, and they want to smoke some cannabis or take it with a tincture or whatever, that's medicating. They want to relax. I took some CBD before we got on here. Helps me, like, I'm not feeling anything, but maybe a
Yeah.
psychological thing, just something to help relax me a little bit, because I can get kind of wired up when I talk about cannabis. Um, but so adult use, and then uh, medicinal use. That's
I think that's good to note, the difference of the terminology, because you are right. It has been considered like a stigma for a number of years, even well before I was even born. And I feel like to say recreational, it's kind of just like the normal term that's always thrown out there.
yeah.
And people automatically think, oh, it's just a bunch of potheads that just want to smoke. It's the 60s all over again. But in reality, that's not the case, especially if you learn more about it. So I will make sure to use adult usage versus saying recreational, because you're right. It's not like kicking a ball. It's not like going to the park or anything like that. It's its own thing. But I want to ask about, So we know that in 2010 in California, medicinal cannabis um, was approved by the voters. In 2016, adult usage of cannabis was approved. Um, Now, this is solely my opinion on the item. Um, in 2016, when the adult usage came into play, um, I felt it did not go far enough in the sense of those that were already convicted for crimes dealing with cannabis, they didn't have that option to pretty much clear away their records. So everybody after 2016 that uses it, there's nothing, it's not a big deal. It's more like a slap on the wrist if they go without those guidelines. But those prior to that 2016 that were busted for having a small amount, um, still have to report that on the record because it's a conviction from whatever level it may be. What are your thoughts about that? Do you believe Prop 64, that was the one in 2016, do you believe it actually did what it should have done, or should have gone a few steps further?
Well, when it comes to legislation, there is no legislation that has gone far enough. What we need to do before we start toiling down here in the city of Oxnard or county of Ventura, the state of California, the federal government is the one that runs everything. I mean, it's legal here in California, but technically, cannabis is still illegal in this country. The feds can come in and shut you down. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it because it is considered a Schedule One drug, like cocaine, like heroin, like all those drugs that are really bad for you. So everybody who works in cannabis and in this industry, who is an activist and advocate for it, we understand and know, and we're always fighting for that declassification of cannabis, not to push it to Schedule Two or Schedule Three, declassify it completely, take it off that list of drugs because it's not it's that was something that was created a long time ago and it's outdated. So when you do that now when the federal government does that, declassifies it, now that means there are no laws on the books that you can be charged for growing whatever, there's it's now it's technically it's legal. And with that, we also say you have to expunge all of the prisoners who were arrested with nonviolent cannabis crimes. There's guys who maybe got caught driving it into Arizona, or who got caught with a lot of it here in Oxnard or whatever because they were selling it non-violent. They were just selling it to make money, or they were growing it, and we call that the legacy market, right? Not the black market, but the legacy market. All those people need to be freed, period. We can't do anything until all of those people are freed and let free out of our prison system. I don't know what the exact percentage of it is that are in our prison system, but it's a high percentage are non-violent cannabis crimes for a plant. Now, if they had a gun in the crime or they were robbing somebody, that's a completely different story. We're just talking about somebody who's growing it. You have people now who are corporations who are growing large fields of cannabis, and we still have people in prison for doing the same exact thing that they did, but now because it's legal, these guys, the corporate guys, can grow it, but these guys are languishing in prisons for something very similar. It's not fair. It's not fair at all. It just speaks to how behind we are socially and legislatively, if that's a word, in our appreciation and our acceptance of this plant. And that now we're starting to go into the topic that I do get really passionate about too, which is social equity. And social equity speaks exactly on those issues. That's the true basic want from us who are advocates and activists, is that declassifying, descheduling of cannabis, and expungement of records, and that has to be done, on a federal level, a state level, and even here locally. So that would mean anybody, even here in Ventura County, if you've been convicted of a nonviolent cannabis crime, you should have your record expunged. Um, and be able to work in that industry. Right now, in a lot of states across the country, if you have a felony on your record, say you do get out of prison, you can't work in the cannabis industry. And here, this might be a legacy grower who knows how to grow the best cannabis with the best techniques, with the best genetics and crossbreeding, and he can't work in the industry because he's carrying that felony with him. Totally unfair. But yet, the guy who doesn't know as much can can do that. He doesn't have a passion for the plant. He doesn't have appreciation for the plant. He's just some corporate guy who's paying somebody to go and kind of halfway do it, and they're making money. So you can see how that creates this disparity between the classes, in a sense, on accepting on the acceptance of cannabis. So that's one thing that those laws, they were cute, they were great, and they started they started the ball rolling. But unfortunately, what California did was they said, well, we know we know there are many social equity issues like that, like people in prisons and things like that. We'll come back and fix them. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, man. These issues have to be addressed. By the time they're able to come and work in the industry, all of the good jobs, the good opportunities, the money that the investors are willing to pay, banking is going to be set. It's all done. There's going to be nothing. I heard somebody on Clubhouse the other day. They said, and it does unfortunately become a people of color issue versus a white issue, and they say they want us to be high, but they don't want us to be rich, because if we want to be high, then they'll sell it to us all day long, right? They have a market, but they won't empower us to be part of the program, be part of the industry, to be part of those billions of dollars. And that's what social equity movement is trying to change. We're trying to give those people that opportunity to come out of the system, who are felons, who are smart, maybe businessmen in what they did in the cannabis industry, and give them that opportunity and give them that leg up so that they can be a part of this industry, empower them so that they can create generational wealth for their families. It's already hard enough for people of color to go in and get those big loans that you want to get in the bank. I don't know if you've ever tried to get it's difficult. So we need to be able to allow that process to happen, and give those people, give the people of color, or the people, not even just people of color, people who were in that legacy market, who are still languishing in prisons, that opportunity to come back in and work in this industry. Until we do that, it's really going to be a white man's game, um, and they're going to make all the money, and we're going to be the people of color are going to be kind of shut out again from an industry that they know so much about. And that goes back, this whole prohibition thing, which started in man early 1900s, uh, was the reason most of the we deported this illegal vision of cannabis. It was in the 1900s, early 1900s. Even before that, this country was founded on hemp. There was times when you were required, if you had property, you were required to grow hemp in your property, because they used it for rope and fabric and oils and for all of those things. And then the 1900s came around, the Industrial Revolution. People started thinking, well, these big magnates like William Randolph Hearst, who was the big newspaper empire guy, and Dow Chemicals, they were coming around. They had just created a nylon, which was like a synthetic fabric, basically. You had other industrialists who saw hemp as a threat, right? They saw hemp as a threat because it could grow anywhere. It was easy to grow. Anybody could do it. They had started even manufacturing these machines, the decortigators, those kind of things. And William Randolph Hearst and all those guys said, "Hey, you know what? We need to make this plant illegal. It's affecting our business. It's affecting our future." So that's what they did. That is just one of the reasons. The other reason is linked to immigration of Mexicans into the United States in the early 1900s. Following the Mexican Revolution, a lot of Mexicans came up here, and they brought marijuana with them. And that they used to use it as a medicine. They used it as a relaxant. And in order to have an excuse to search and deport the Mexican immigrants, marijuana became the perfect drug to criminalize and label as dangerous. The guy who was responsible for that is a guy by the name of Henry Anslinger, and he headed the Department of Prohibition at the time. And he was dealing with the backlash of the alcohol ban. They had just legalized alcohol, and once that ban was lifted, his department was basically non-operational. They didn't have anything they do. They didn't have anything to do. So he started a misinformation campaign that sold the idea that cannabis was a devil drug, that it turned men into wild beasts, that made them attack women. The government made a movie called Reefer Madness. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's the most hilarious thing you'll ever see. They smoke a joint and their eyes get big and they start doing it. That was what it was supposed to do, right? He even solicited 30 scientists to prove to the public that it was bad, and 29 of them said no, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't know what happened to the other guy, but 29 of them wouldn't go along. But he had William Randolph Hearst and those other industrialists behind it, and so he had that reason to make it illegal. Um, so that's it went back and forth, because then during World War II, they legalized hemp again because they had this program. I think it was a Hemp for Victory campaign. They even had it in the name, Hemp for Victory campaign, during World War II. And there was because they needed all of the stuff that they knew it was good for, the ropes, the fabric, and all of those things again. So then it became illegal, and then the war on drugs in the 70s, Richard Nixon, again, a way to keep people of color down, way to keep the hippies tempered, and it was just a way to again demonize a certain population so that they could have a reason to arrest and detain and keep them quiet. So that's one of the reasons that today social equity is so important. Those things. Prohibition had an effect, a disproportionate effect on people of color throughout time in this country. So that's why social equity is important today, because we have to right those wrongs. We have to right those wrongs. For example, if we took Oxnard, for example, you can probably already know what areas of Oxnard were disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. La Colonia, South Oxnard, if you expand it out to the county, Santa Paula, East Ventura, who lives there? Primarily people of color. They were the ones arrested. They were the ones pulled over. They were the ones, one arrest and he goes to prison. You think that didn't affect that family for generations? It did. It did affect that family for generations, probably still today. So that's why, we're not talking about reparations. We're not saying, oh, give money to the community. No, empower some people from that community to be part of this business so they can do with for themselves what any wealthy person would do with that money. So that's why social equity is important. And it's not going to be, those issues are not going to be addressed until, and I hate to say white people, but unfortunately, just for the sake of social equity conversation, until white people get behind social equity, and there's a lot of them, many in the cannabis industry already understand this. Until they get behind it and fight for it and be vocal about it, nothing's going to change. Because with what little information our council members, not, I don't want to say in Oxnard, but this is statewide, around the country, whatever, the biggest challenge we have is keeping them educated about these issues, about the health benefits, about the history, so that they understand, oh yeah, we really should think about this before we roll it out and just open it up to anybody having a license. So you hear that in a lot of local ordinances with the city. They talk about social equity components or local equity. Local equity is not the same as social equity. Local equity is, oh, I live here, yeah, okay, give me a license, or I get preferential treatment. No, social equity is what's important. Is that guy who lives right outside of Denver, who got caught 25 years ago selling weed? How are you going to how are you going to evolve him into the business? How are you going to make him part of the dialogue, so he can not be at seat at the table kind of thing, right? So that's what social equity is, why it's so important, and why it's so important in the communities that are primarily of color. So you'll always hear me always talk about social equity. I'm a big advocate for it. I'm an activist for it, and it's not only here. You know, it's everywhere. I told you I've traveled to Mexico. I've traveled to Colombia. Social equity is needed there too. The cartels run everything. The women were some of the best growers, there are a lot of women growers in those countries because the men are off doing their work to feed the family, and then the women can grow to supplement with the income, the little income that they get, and they're some of the best growers. Again, now, so internationally, we're trying to fight for local social equity because some of those people need to escape the grip of the cartels, escape the grip of the government, and be able to partake in this industry that now is going to be globalized. Uh, hopefully, and so that we can make a difference in their lives. And I always say, if I travel places, I say, hey, first of all, I want to apologize to you as a resident of the United States because we're the ones who deported this concept and this idea that cannabis was an evil drug, and everybody around the world did what we did. And now we have to right that wrong, and we have to export our knowledge, export our ability to manufacture products. We're the best of that in the world. We can take a product, we can commercialize it, sell it, and market it. And I think that's what we need to do as a country and as an activist or as a cannabis industry to help educate and give back to the world what we took away.
Now, let me ask you, have you had any opportunities to speak to those that, were incarcerated, were arrested, that have this on their record, of, before it was legal back in 2016?
There's a lot of people, and sometimes it's not even people who have been in prison for a long time, like 10, 15 years. One a friend of mine who's very active in social equity and cannabis licensing all across the country. He he got caught in college selling cannabis, selling weed, selling marijuana, cannabis. Um, he was just trying to make it through college. He lost both of his parents to the war on drugs, and now he's trying to make his way through college, selling cannabis. He gets popped and he gets incarcerated. And so it took him time to bounce back out of that. And there's a lot of those stories like that. Lots of stories like that where, yeah, I did 10 years, I did 5 years, I did a year, I got caught, I have this felony on me. As far as I haven't talked to anybody in prison, there are some really good projects going on. Uh, a friend of mine is a really well-known activist. His name's Steve D'Angelo, and he had the first commercial dispensary up in Northern California called Harborside. And he's an activist, and he's put together this program called the Last Prisoner Project. And you can look it up online. And that's all they do is they go and try to help advocate for various prisoners who are incarcerated in different federal penitentiaries, try to get them out, try to get public support, write letters and to governors and senators and that kind of thing. And then when they get out, they try to get them started back into the industry, or they just give them, award them some money that they can use to just jumpstart their life. And there are other organizations like that, but I personally know Steve, and I know his work with that. So there are opportunities. Ojai, one of the dispensaries in Ojai, they have a small museum, and I think it's what's the name will come to me right now. Um, they have like a small museum where they have all of these prisoners who are in prison, and that you could write to at the very least. Say, hey, you can pick that guy and you can write him a letter, but they have their stories. Some of them are really sad. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, man, these guys got caught just, you know, maybe they purchased a stolen tractor or a piece of farm equipment, and that's how they caught him. And they go, oh, and you just happen to be growing cannabis with that. So now they compounded that his charges to a federal offense because that stolen tractor or that tractor was being used to cultivate cannabis. Stories like that, and these were guys who had no money. They were just trying to support their family, and now they're in prison. So there's opportunities to meet and hear these stories, see these stories. You can see them online. Check out Last Prisoner Project. You can, on my I have a Facebook page called Social Equity Oxnard. I try to share some of those stories. There was one where there was a young man from Los Angeles who was just released. Actually, Trump pardoned him, and it was a cannabis crime. And he was just released. I mean, he has kids. He missed their birthdays, the whole deal. But it was a cannabis crime, and Trump did the right thing by letting him go. Unfortunately, that's only one, and there are thousands, thousands.
I I asked about that only because of the fact that, and I appreciate you giving that website so people have an opportunity to go check it out for themselves. Um, but I guess ultimately what I'm curious about is their impression of 2016 in California. Again,
Gotcha.
that's when adult usage was legalized. Anyone over the age of 21. And I'm curious about their thoughts about that. How did they feel to know that an individual, myself, yourself included, can have six plants in their home? No restrictions as far as the height, the width, nothing. Just six plants. You're allowed to have it. Go wild with it. But make sure not to get more than six plants. So I don't know if you've heard any of those stories, those comments, their opinions about that, how they feel about that.
Yeah. No, I haven't spoken to anybody who is incarcerated themselves, but I can only imagine that the only way they're feeling is not just left out. They're pretty pissed off,
Yeah.
and because they're in prison and they're seeing this industry just growing. And they're Forbes magazine guys in suits, and you have I mean, I'm sorry, you have Canopy, you have uh, these big companies that's just growing. They're going to become the Budweisers of cannabis, and these guys are sitting in prison for having grown maybe 8 plants. And I mean, how would you feel if you got arrested for driving your bus because your bus was whatever, and then you find out next, hey, they invented a thing to drive the way I was driving it. Now I'm still in prison. How would you feel? This was your livelihood. This was your life, and for growing a plant that's considered a medicine, it's considered essential now. Can Dispensaries didn't close during the pandemic; they were open. They were open throughout. They never closed. Maybe a couple days just to kind of gather their thoughts, but they were open. I can't imagine they're feeling too good, and they're still in there. And we have to keep that in mind. I think about those people every day because of my work in social equity and my belief in it. So, can I do? Yeah, I can do. It can help, but there's people who are already doing that, but there's just so much work in cannabis, Daniel, as far as what has to be done. I was when I was when I knew I was going to talk to you about. I go, man, where do we start? There's just so much. There's the health benefits. There's social equity. There's local things that are going on. I know cannabis is going to be legal here in Oxnard. What about, how are we going to train the police? How are the police going to be trained? And I'm not just saying this for Oxnard. This is everywhere. Are they still going to be pulling people over if somebody smells like cannabis, or if they're walking down the street? They shouldn't, right? I don't know how many plants you can grow here in Oxnard. I is can you and if what if you live in government housing? It's federally illegal. And what if your neighbor calls you and say, hey, they're making, the police come over or whatever, and the landlord finds out you've been smoking marijuana or cannabis, and you most likely you can get thrown out of your spot. So now where can cannabis users go and use cannabis? Now we start to advocate for lounges, places like where you have a bar where you can go and chill for an hour or two, like you would a liquor bar, and just and enjoy your cannabis, or medicate, especially for people who can't smoke it at home. So there's a lot of issues that revolve around social equity that have to be addressed before you can just say, okay, dispensaries, you can just all open. No, man, there's a lot of things connected to the culture of cannabis that need to be addressed from a social equity standpoint, that need to be addressed. Otherwise, we're going to have to start having all these little micro problems, like, oh, this person got popped, they had 7 plants or whatever. You see, I have a plant right back here. I always like to keep cannabis close. A little sponsor there. I brought her in from inside. It was kind of cold. I thought she was going to get some natural rain today, but she didn't. But what are we going to? There's just a lot of issues that need to be resolved on a local level, and I'm not just saying just here in Oxford, but everywhere, that need to be addressed. I just read today where Governor DeSantis of Florida, not DeSantis of Florida, it was a state senator in Florida, is trying to keep felons from receiving the new mandated $15 an hour pay.
Mm.
What does that tell you? If you have a felony, you can't make the federal $15 an hour wage. Who's going to be most affected by that?
Yeah.
I don't even have to say it. But those are the kind of things that we're fighting. It's you can't put out a fire with gasoline, man. You have to address these things, and until we get more vocal about it and educate people about it, then hopefully people will start to see what we're trying to do and make a difference and encourage their local legislators or their local municipal leaders as to what needs to be done so that we can truly have cannabis and hemp in our life in a way that can make a difference for everybody from a health standpoint.
Yeah.
Dispensaries are great, but if you've ever been into one, the products are expensive. How about the elderly who need just affordable medicine? They should have a right to that medicine at a low discounted price. Nobody's talking about that for the elderly in all of this dispensary talk. Yeah, you can go buy some, so what do? They go to the legacy market. And we don't want that because we don't know what's in it. We don't know what chemicals are being used, what nutrients are being used, if any.
Yeah.
And the good thing about the regulated dispensary market, it's all track and trace. When they put that seed in the ground, they know where that cannabis is going into what product. If it's going to go into this tincture, they know where that seed was planted in the ground so that they can track and trace it all the way back. But so again, elderly need their medicine, but it needs to be affordable. They're not addressing that. Most cities are not addressing that. And it's unfortunate because those are the people who are working hard. They've worked hard. They need it. They have aches and pains. I have aches and pains. That's why I use it. And I don't smoke it. I do sometimes, but I take a lot of tinctures, CBD and CBD with THC tinctures. I sleep not so well sometimes, but I know if I want to get a good night's sleep, take some of that 1-to-1 THC CBD tincture. Man, I wake up in the same position that I went to sleep in. Who doesn't want that?
You bring up a great point in regards to our elderly, our seniors. And it's just not only on the cannabis uses. I think on multiple levels, our government is kind of failing them. But that's a topic for another conversation. We did get a comment that in regards to the Ojai dispensary, there's two.
That's
There's Sespe Creek Collective or
that's
Ojai Greens.
Ojai Greens, Sespe, and then Shangri-La as well. Sespe is the one that has the little museum. I don't know if it's open. I know back there this was a year and a half ago when I was up there. They had showed me the little room. They said, yeah, we'd like to open it up, but I thought it was a really cool little room that they had that you could see that. But yeah, Sespe, Ojai Greens, and Shangri-La. Shangri-La used to be by appointment only. I don't know if they are anymore, but one of the important things is like if you're a cannabis user, everybody goes, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to, what to take. That I'm going to assume a lot of that responsibility locally. I want to teach people about cannabis, about its use, how to dose, or ideas, and about social brands. There are social equity brands, right? There are people who are people of color or who were prisoners or whatever. They've been through incubator programs and they've developed their own products and they're using the money to give back into the community or the communities that they serve. And their products are maybe being sold throughout the entire state. I want to create conscientious buyers. So you're not just going in and asking the bud tender. The bud tender is the person who's helping you decide what you're going to buy. Oh, I'll just take that one because you don't know how much they know about that particular product. I want to teach people what the health benefits are, what the different dosing methods are, and to be a conscientious purchaser so that when you're going to say, okay, well, how about that brand? Or go in and ask for that specific brand because that there's good intentions behind that brand. It's not just some guys wanting to make a lot of money. No, there are some good intentions behind that brand because the money is not going just to buy a boat or open your third dispensary. It's going to something good, and that's what's cannabis is a well-intentioned plant. Cannabis is it has to be seen that way, And a lot of entrepreneurs are getting into it. It's the green rush. They're getting into it for money, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with taking advantage of that. But in the end, it's going to be those people who are well intentioned, and it's probably going to be the legacy growers because they know the benefits of it. You know, people have to be educated about it. And so that's what I would like to do locally. I would like to educate people locally, bring some of the experts that I know into this area, whether it's virtually or in person, and educate our Latino community, the Spanish speaking community. Let them know huge stigma in that community, huge. But they're the ones out in the fields working. They're coming home with arthritic hands. Their knees are sore. Their feet are beat up by being in the water all day. They could use these products. They can't afford to go to the dispensaries and get them. We need to develop programs where they're getting those products to help them remove the stigma. And only through education are we going to be able to help remove that stigma and help those people who really need it. So that's really important. And like I said, I'm going to assume some of that responsibility here locally in platforms like this, so that we can teach people the health benefits, so that they can feel easier about going into a dispensary. I don't know. I've been to all the dispensaries except a few. Um, I don't hear a lot of Spanish being spoken in those places. How
Yeah.
much do you think? How much do you think? They're paying attention. They're missing a whole section of a whole sector of an audience that needs to be educated, that needs to be addressed, that need to know that this is what you can benefit from. A lot of our mothers and grandmothers, they all had the cannabis in the jar with alcohol in it. Remember that? They,
Wow.
everybody had it. My parents had it, and it was all green, and they would take it and they would put it on their joints, and that's how they used it. Now, I don't know if they were getting CBD at the time. Now they probably thought they were getting that psychoactive, but no. The way cannabis works, when it's on the plant, it has THC acid, THCA in its natural form. When you burn it, it goes through a chemical process. They call it decarboxylation. It goes through that chemical process and turns the THCA into THC. And so that's what gives you that high. So you can eat a whole plant and you're not going to get high, but until you burn it. That's why people put it in brownies, make butters out of it, because they're putting it on the stove or in the oven. They're decarboxylating it, putting it into their food, and now they have cannabinated food. So, and
Good
I
to
have
know.
relatives who make their own butter, and because my tia can't sleep. She has arthritis. She can't go to sleep without that cracker and that butter on it. And if she didn't have that, her life would be, her quality of life wouldn't be the same.
Yeah.
So all of those things, that's what I would like to do. I'd like to love to teach people how to grow their own in their own backyard right here in Oxnard, so that they can. Uh, that's nothing that has to do with the planning commission. That's everywhere. We want to encourage people to grow their own, so that way they know they can appreciate it and use it. And then now, what do you do with it? Now, how can I use it in my general health? So that's my goal. It's far fetched, but again, that's what I said. I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for the future, because
Yeah.
that's where it's really going to make a difference. I'll be dead and dust, and maybe then it'll be open, and there'll be medicines, and it's the world is passing us by. Colombia's legalizing it. Mexico's on the verge of making it legal. That's going to be the largest cannabis market in the world. Israel just is building a research center, a government sponsored research center, where they're doing a lot of research in Israel, tons of research over there. I've met some of those great doctors. I've met Lumir Hanous in Mexico. He's the one who diagrammed I can't remember, but it's
Anatomy.
the internal uh, cannabinoid structure. He's the one who kind of discovered that. But Israel, we send Israel $80 billion a year, and they're doing cannabis. Here in the United States, we can't even do proper research because it's illegal. All of the universities, they get their money from federal grants. They're not going to get any money to do cannabis research. That's why they can't do it. And if they do, the cannabis has to be grown in a property in Mississippi.
Oh,
How
wow.
good of how good can the cannabis possibly be in Mississippi? No, the best cannabis on the planet Earth is right here in California. We need to be doing research with cannabis here, and why not here in Ventura County? I see that as being our a good way, a ticket for really boosting the economy here locally. Grow cannabis in the greenhouses, the THC kind. Involve the local community colleges. We have a great nursing university here at Channel Islands. We have other universities around. Let's involve them and do the research and we could be a Silicon Valley of cannabis here in this area. But it's not until we start opening ourselves up. We have a port right here
Mhm.
that can ship hemp or cannabis anywhere around the world or receive those products. We really need to start taking advantage of our geographical location and make cannabis a good thing for the world, and we could do it right here. You know, you grow it, and what do we? Let's be known for cannabis instead of beets, which we were known for, and then strawberries. So that's my dream. You can see I get excited about that stuff, but it's hopefully that rubs off onto other people, and we can make a lasting impact.
Well, we've talked a lot about cannabis, and I want people to know this. I feel like it's important. I personally do not use cannabis. My profession is a safety sensitive
Yep.
position, so I am not legally by the federal and state, I am not allowed to use any type of products,
Yep.
even with like a 0.00001% chance of THC. It's no a go for that. But I do appreciate this conversation and the information because it was a lot of information and information that I personally did not know. I thought I knew something about cannabis, both medicinal and adult use, but it turned out that there was still a lot more information that I needed to learn about it. And I do appreciate that. Is if anybody wanted to learn more about cannabis usage, or social equity, where can they go to learn more or get in contact with you for that?
You can always contact me through my Facebook page. You can find me on Rodney Medina. That's my personal page, but Social Equity Oxnard, which I've set up where I address more specifically cannabis issues. Um, I'm on Clubhouse. Clubhouse is a good thing, but you have to be invited to that. You can look for me there and Rodney Medina on Clubhouse. Of course, if it's social equity with regards to incarceration, there's a Last Prisoner Project. Um, you can go to YouTube and see a lot of my work. If you go to the Green Flower channel, and they have tons of videos there that talk about cultivation. They don't talk too much about social equity, but they cultivation, the health, medicinal benefits. You have Mara Gordon, who was on Weed the People. She talks about specific ailments that can be solved or helped with cannabis. Dr. Michelle Ross, who addresses women's issues. There's a lot of things coming out now with juicing that's going to be happening that you're going to see involving hemp or CBD or juice bars with using the raw materials. There's just so much. I mean, YouTube is probably one of the greatest sources, but go to the Green Flower one because that's a lot of my work when I was working there, and I'm quite proud of all of that content that we created. It was very educational. That's where I got my start. That's where the fire was started for me, as far as understanding the plant, appreciating it. So, but check out Social Equity Oxnard, and you can always contact me through there and leave a message, and I'll do the research for you, whatever you want to know. I don't have all the answers. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a grower, except for the couple that I do. Um, but that we're a community, and we always want to expand that community. And I can make one before we go. I just want to tell this quick story. Every year we used to go to the Friday night concerts at Heritage Square, and I had these five young ladies who were friends of mine. Well, they're my age, but they're still young ladies, and they knew what I did. And one of them asked me, she was, "I need help." She was, "Rodney, I need help. I know you know a lot about cannabis. Can you help me?" And I said, "Sure. Well, what do you want to do?" I go, "First, you need." This was when it was just medicinal. I go, "First, you need to go get your medicinal card. You can't even go to a dispensary to do it." Because I was telling her so much. She was, "I need to do it. I go, "Well, you need to do it, but go get your medicinal card." So then I think it was the following year, the whole year passed, or maybe it was just a couple weeks from the beginning of the series to the end. But anyway, she goes, "Hey," she goes, "Did we tell you what happened with us?" I go, "No." She goes, "We all have our medicinal cards now just because of you." She was used to talking, come, you were so passionate about, and you knew all this stuff, and now we're all using it. I go, that's awesome, man. That's exactly what I want to do. They grew an appreciation. They went through the process. They got their cards, and now they're using it for their everyday um, uh, life. To help improve their quality of life. And that's my goal to do, whether on a small scale or large scale. And I'm happy to do it for anybody who has any issues or any questions regarding cannabis and how it can help them.
That's awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Rodney Medina, our guest tonight, advocate on cannabis as well as social equity. Please look for him on Facebook at Social Equity Oxnard. Reach out to him, ask him any questions. And like he said, he is willing to do the research for you to get you those answers so that you have a better understanding about cannabis usage. Um, as many of you probably could hear, it is raining outside, so please be sure to drive safely when you're going through our streets. Reduce your speeds. Make sure your headlights are on when your wiper blades are on, and please, please, please use your turn signals. Please be sure to join us tomorrow for a special edition of Oxnard Live. Excuse me, as we have our District 2 candidate forum. We have 6 of the 13 candidates that will be joining us tomorrow. And if you have a question or want to provide a comment, please visit oxnardlive.net/district2 forum. There, you'll be able to have an opportunity to submit your requests, and then you will come live on the candidate forum and ask your questions or simply give a comment. Again, that's on oxnardlive.net, the District 2 forum. Just click the tab and fill out the 3 forms. It's just your name, phone number, and an email, and you'll get instructions on how to participate tomorrow for the candidate forum at 6 p.m. right here on Oxnard Live. Rodney, thank you again for joining us and giving us all this information. And you really opened my eyes as to that I need to do more research about cannabis and the importance of social equity in multiple communities, not just in the city of Oxnard, and how around the world too, pretty much about social equity. So thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Oxnard Live, all live and 100% real. Have a great night, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow for our candidate forum tomorrow right here at 6 p.m. on Oxnard Live. Thank you.